I'll turn on my camera there. Hopefully he got bumped off. Hopefully he'll be able to come back on there. Someone was trying to join. Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to talk about patent and latent defects. And how they affect us and the disclosures that we have to do on our listings. So I guess we're going to go over the difference between a patent and a latent defect. Do you guys know what the difference is between a patent and a latent defect? Yeah, as opposed to what you can't. So defects are regarded as being two kinds, patent or latent. Patent are those that can be discovered by inspection or ordinary vigilance on the part of the purchaser. With respect to these ordinary, the rule is caveat emptor, buyer beware. But the latent defects are those that which cannot be revealed by any inquiry or reasonable inspection. So a lot of times when we hire our home inspectors and that, even they won't find a latent defect because they're only allowed to do so much, right? They're not allowed to open up the walls. They're not allowed to unscrew things. They're not allowed to take things apart, right? They're supposed to be looking for patent defects within the home that they're visibly can see right away. So an example of this is mold. Mold is easily seen. So, you have some pictures like this. This would be a patent defect, right? That's readily seen. Okay. Now, what do you do if you have a homeowner who tries to cover this up? If you have a homeowner who says, I'm just going to paint over that. Exactly. And then you try to hide it, right? So the disclosure on things is really important. I always say full disclosure because if you have a patent defect disclosure, a vendor is not really under an obligation to say something that's visibly, if there's a big crack in the wall, you don't have to point it out to people. Okay. But it should be because they should be seeing it by reasonable investigation from their home inspector, from their realtor walking through. You should get used to as a realtor looking up all the time. I have this habit when I walk through homes, everybody sort of looks at all the pretty stuff. I always look up at the ceiling, make sure there's no mold, no cracks. When we're walking outside, look at the foundation. So get in the habit of looking for these things because sometimes your clients don't see them. Fraudulent. So this is where a vendor makes efforts to conceal the patent defect, like that mold we saw. If they paint over it with stuff, that could be really considered fraudulent because they're probably concealing a problem. A lot of homeowners will say, oh, no, it's not a problem anymore. It was before, but now it isn't. So by them hiding it, it becomes a problem because if it comes out further that mold resurfaces because there is an existing water problem, you as the realtor could get in trouble for not disclosing it because you're aware that your client painted over it. Further to that, that you could your client could get in trouble and sued by trying to hide it, right? Even if they say it wasn't a problem before, you could pass that information on to the other realtor and let it be their choice to investigate it further with a home inspection or something. Like, yeah, oh, the washroom leaked a few years ago. There is some mold, but they've had the problem fixed since. They just haven't painted over it, right? So it's a good idea to explain those things.
This or they can come after a certain time, or for example, after a year, they can come and say, oh, you tainted, and then.
So there's no real cap on it. If they can prove that you somehow or your seller somehow willfully hid it. Okay.
Oh.
So for instance, I had a property that I sold in Peterborough specifically, and this comes to me all the time because I did everything in my power to protect my buyer. We were doing the home inspection and it was brand new renovation in the basement and everything. And we looked and the baseboard had like, that little bit of a water line, like moldy kind of water line on it. And so we did our investigation and we asked the listing agent. The listing agent asked their seller, and the seller said, oh, no, 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 no. We did have a leak in the basement once, but we fixed it. And now it's never been a problem for the last 5 years now. We haven't had an issue. Okay. But we were a little confused because I said, it doesn't make sense to me. This is where you need to like really investigate and help your client out. Okay. Now, if I hadn't done this, I'd probably be in trouble. I said, this looks like a new renovation though, newer than 5 years. This is brand new carpeting that's been put down. So why would they take brand new carpeting and put the baseboard that has the water line on it? I'm like, I feel like there might be a problem here. So anyways, we went back and forth, and between me and the listing agent, we got the sellers to put in writing that there is no pre-existing problem, They haven't experienced any floods and the problem has been rectified, right? I got it in writing from the sellers because what happened was the very first spring that my client had, basement flooded. The brand new carpet was soaking wet in the basement. So what does she do? She calls me and she's like, they knew there was a problem, blah, blah, blah. And I'm flooding right now. The only thing that she had was that I had got it in writing from the sellers. So she was able to go back lawyer to lawyer and recoup her losses. She went and she fixed the whole basement up. And her lawyer said, look, like we're going to sue you unless you cover the cost of this. And they covered the cost of it because they guaranteed us there isn't a problem. So it's a good idea to get it in writing. This was after everything was done and we were doing a walkthrough, right? So I if I had seen it beforehand and I caught it like in a home inspection, I probably would have put it in an amendment for the agreement of purchase and sale or in one of the schedules to have the client to have the seller sign off on it. But in this case, I got it in writing and it saved my client. Now imagine I hadn't. What do you think the client would do if they had to fix a basement that they just bought?
Yeah, pay for it.
They'd have to pay for it, but they'd be coming after me too, right? Because I'm their buyer agent. And I see a lot of agents like miss things like this, and your clients will come back on you for it. You know what I mean? Things like this, things like if you didn't write in fridge stove, if you didn't write in that the hot water tank was a rental, all of these things your client can come back on you for, and you end up losing most of your commission back because of a mistake that you made, right? So you have to be careful with it. So, latent defect disclosure. Likewise, if a vendor was aware of a latent defect and failed to disclose it, this may be construed as misrepresentation and give the purchaser a legal right to recover against the vendor. If known to the vendor, must disclose. So, I have a lot of clients who say to me, "Ooh, I don't know if it's a good idea to disclose it." You know what I mean? They can't see it. It's not really a problem. But the thing is that even though you don't think it's a problem, the next person might, right? So I always say as a listing agent, disclose because if you're going to purchase the property or Sri's going to purchase the property and I disclose to both of you, you're going to say, I don't really want the property. And he'll say, I don't care. I'll buy it still, right? So there's people out there who'll buy it. The problem is if I don't disclose to you and you buy it and it bothers you after the fact, that's when it becomes a big problem for the seller and the listing. So it's better to disclose and weed out the person who doesn't want it. They don't buy it to begin with, right? But a lot of these agents just want to hustle. They want to sell the property no matter what. So they try to hide things. And that's when it becomes a big problem, right? So how do you protect your buyers? You do property walkthroughs and visit the property at various times, right? Morning, night. You might discover you went to the property during the nighttime, but during the daytime, a big train comes through and like makes a lot of noise in the neighborhood or something, right? Speaking to the seller and representative is not enough, okay? Hire your home inspector, okay? Do Google searches and talk to the neighbors because a lot of times they'll say things are going on. So I had a property on Vermorton that I was selling that had a fire in it, right? And my client was like, "Oh, no, 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 but we fixed everything. We don't need to say there was fire, do we?" I said, "Yeah, but there's no problem." I said, "No, there's no current problem, but your neighbors have seen that there's a fire. They'll be able to tell your purchaser. So it's a big problem, right?" And I'm really glad that we convinced him to disclose there was a fire because right enough, I knew someone across the street. As soon as I put my sign up, he called me and he said, "Hey, you have a listing right across the street from me." He goes, That's the firehouse, right?" Of course, everybody in the neighborhood knows. That's a big deal when a house catches on fire. So speak to the neighbors. Neighbors will tell you a lot, even if the seller or the listing agent isn't disclosing things. Do a Google search on the property. So if there has been a fire or something happening, usually it'll be in the news in a Google search, right? Everybody should be Google searching anything they list or buy. You know what I mean, for their clients anyways. And there's other resources. We're going to talk about that as far as like disclosures are concerned that we can look up on property addresses, right? So incorporate any representations or warranties that enticed you to purchase the home into your contract of the purchase and sale. So if somebody says, "Oh no, we just did a brand new basement, it's not flooding anymore." Like I said, we can incorporate that into our agreement of purchase and sale. Oh, hold on, let me just let a couple people in. always reduce it to writing because everybody can say anything at the end of the day, but you don't have any proof after the fact. Because after the fact, if it floods, if I had gone back, maybe the listing agent or the seller would say, we never said that. You know what I mean? But reduce it to writing always. So, how do you protect your sellers from getting in trouble with purchasers? You're going to ask your seller all the questions, ask if work was done to fix anything and was it successful. And if they know, disclose, disclose, disclose. So, disclosure is always best, right? They have that SPIS form. Have you guys ever looked at it in our forms? The seller property information sheet. So, they have the seller property information sheet. I think I might have a copy of it here. Um, it's I never really advise agents to put it up with their listing. That's supposed to be the purpose of it. But what I do is sometimes I'll take it along on my listing appointments. I'm just seeing if I have it here. Um, because, oh, here it is. So seller property information sheet. It's a good checklist to take along with you for listing appointments. So you make sure you're asking your clients all the questions, right? So let me just get this a little bit bigger here. So I've occupied the property from and to. Does the does any other party have ownership in this? Is it a condominium? But then it also goes into, do you have a survey? How many of you got into the end of your transaction and you realize once you get an offer in hand, you're like, oh, I didn't ask them if they had a survey, and somebody's written it, right? It happens, right? I tell you, if you bring this along, that won't happen to you. Or if you're selling a condominium and you get to the close to your bid date, you're like, oh shoot, didn't order the status certificate. That's going to take 10 days. My bid date's 3 days away, right? So it'll stop you from making these silly mistakes because it's a really good checklist for you to use. But then it also goes on to ask you, is it on municipal water? Did you do the roof recently? What are the recent renovations you've done? Any environmental concerns for the property? Any improvements or structural properties? If you have a fireplace, was it wet inspected? Different things like this. So while I won't encourage you to put this on your listing, and the reason why do you think I don't encourage us to put this on the listing?
And so many things it's like even if you go to a brand new house, there will be so many mistakes you can find out, right?
Exactly.
So you can't fulfill everything, right? So it's better not to keep it there.
It's it's better not because you might make your client liable. So I've had people put the SPIS up on their listing and maybe they said the roof was done in 2007. Well, now you have it in writing on the listing and maybe, it slipped their mind. It wasn't the summer of 2007, it was the summer of 2006. Now you have someone arguing, oh, I thought the roof was 9 years old and it's really 10 years old and it's only a 10-year shingle and I have to replace it right away. You know, it could bring problems for your clients. But like I say, the form itself is really useful in your listing appointments. When you go for your listing appointments, take it along and go over the checklist with your clients to see. It's not mandatory, no. You know how we have on our MLS data sheet, SPIS, yes or no? We can put no all day long. Yeah. Yeah. Even if we have it in our hands, we don't have to throw it up. Right. So SPIS, good form for us to use. We'll go back to patent latent defects here. Okay, so disclose, disclose, disclose. So now we're going to go on to stigma. What is a stigma? A stigma, okay, in the context of real estate, a stigma is a not physical, intangible attribute of a property that may elicit a psychological or emotional response. So that's really open air. That's a hard one to do. So, for instance, if somebody has died in the property, you know how we ask if somebody's died in the property, that's a stigma. If the general consensus, like maybe the whole street, it's been abandoned for a while and everyone says that's a ghost house, that's a stigma on the property. If there's been criminal activity, say it was a grow up and it was busted and all the police were there and that is a stigma on the property. So why is this a problem, right?
Area, right? But in the neighborhood, they say it's not good.
Yeah.
So some shooting happened, so they say, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, when I was at my other office, there was a big thing that came out about a property in Brampton. And what happened was it wasn't even the property that was sold by the agent. It was the property across the street that was the problem. But the people who bought the house across the street had a real problem with it, right? And they ended up being able to sue their buyer agent. Okay. So what happened was these people purchased a house on the south side of the street, right? The north side of the street, there was a grow up there, and there was a lot of criminal activity happening, lots of people coming and going, and lots of different things. And so when the people bought on the south side of the street realized that this was directly across them on the north side of the street, they were really disturbed by it because they didn't like the fact that there could possibly be in the future other criminal activity coming by, still looking for the people in that house or still looking for the activity that whatever was going on in that house. And they ended up winning. They ended up getting out of the deal and being able to sue their agent. I'll have to figure out what the address was. I used to remember it, but now it's been so many years. But I'll have to figure out the address so you guys can read that. But again, simple Google search for your clients, right? The other thing is, have you guys ever used House Creep? House Creep is a good resource, right? So go to www.housecreep.com and they'll tell you what happened around a property. So we can actually take a look at that if you guys want to. Because I know I've gone over this patent and latent defects a few times. So sometimes it's nice to do it a little bit different every time we train on it. So we'll go to housecreep.com. And just for the fun of it, you can type in your address if you want to see what's happened around you. So maybe I'll type in the office address and see what happens. Okay, so just trying to close some of my things on my screen. So this is House Creep, okay? Search the archives. So it's telling you to find a city, but you can usually type in just an address. Let's go to Toronto.
Like when you Google the house address, right? Sometimes the people register the house for their makeup or basement-based salon.
Yeah.
That is also pop up, right?
Good morning. How are you?
And
Okay, so submit address, find an address, search our archives. Well, you changed it a little bit. I'm just figuring out where to put in the address now. It used to be you just type it in. Let me see if this works. We go here. It's trying to sell you ads now. Continue in 2, 1. There we go. My laptop's also doing this funny thing where I can't catch the bottom of my screen. It won't let me click on it. Okay, so we're searching directory of stigmatized property around the office. So no city, oh, because it's asking for city there. I want to go back and search the address. I'm gonna do this on the fly here, but I used to just be able to type it in at the top. But I know I typed in my address and I was like, oh, you can find out anything. And sometimes it's like 20 years back and you can still see it. And that's another thing. People sometimes say, well, if something happened 20 years ago, is the property still stigmatized? Yeah, if it's known and it can be easily found, then definitely it can be.
So every time it sells, like after the stores.
Yeah, yeah, the stigma never leaves the property. Yeah, yeah. It's not that it means that it's going to greatly affect its value right then and there. I mean, as it gets older, it gets less effective. People might not care that in 1980, you know what I mean, that there was a shooting on the street or something like that. But like it definitely should be disclosed anyways in case people don't know, right? I'm just trying to find out where the address is here. Sorry, I don't want to like waste too much time training here, but it used to be just the toolbar on the top. They seem to have changed it a little bit. It says find an address here. And then what does it click to? Use a search bar above to search by city, address, and more. Okay, but then I search by address. Maybe the office isn't a good address to bring.
There's address called 2 Abbeville Road, property used as a marijuana grow. Revision system by the RCMP. 70 Stevensdale Drive, 65 Green Break Circle. Man dies of complication in lobby.
Oh my goodness, really?
Scarborough, these are all Scarborough.
Yeah. So when I type in my address, I don't know why it's being annoying right now.
518
Submit
Bellamy-
address,
518 Bellamy Road North.
Bellamy Road. What did you do? You typed in the office address?
Just put
Morning.
Scarborough. Find a city, just put Scarborough.
But
Yeah, you can put address as well.
you can put address as well, right?
Yeah, it should come up.
Anyways, I don't know why it's being a little, and I honestly haven't been on it in
Because of so become before it was not famous, you know.
now it's famous, so they've changed up their website a little bit. But anyways, go and try and use it and go and check it out. It's really interesting because I mean, there's all different kinds of stories on there that could stigmatize your property, and you can go and see what it is for the address. But like I say, a simple Google search too. Like if you Google search the address and something has happened there, like a fire or a death or a shooting or something, then you can definitely find it on there, right? And come back to here. So there may have been an event or circumstance that occurred in or near. So it doesn't necessarily have to be just the property that you're selling or buying. It can be in or near the property that does not affect the property's appearance or function, right? But might be considered by some emotionally disquieting. Unlike a latent or patent defect, which may exist at a property, there's nothing physically observable, right? So it's difficult to find. You have to do a little digging, you have to do a little research. It's not something that your home inspector is going to figure out, or that the listing agent or even the person selling it might know. Maybe if the person just bought it 2-3 years ago and their agent didn't do their job, maybe they really don't know to disclose this. But if going forward it's something that might affect your buyer, you need to prove that you did your due diligence and you did some research to figure out that there isn't this problem or the stigma with the property, right? So, like we were talking, a couple examples are the property was used for the ongoing commission of a crime, like drug dealing, chop shop, brothel, or something. A murder or suicide occurred at the property. And again, this isn't something that is going to like be absolutely a horrible thing. I remember I was walking through a property and they had a disclosure saying that the person had committed suicide in the property. And I was walking through with like a contractor guy who flips houses that I work with on the regular. And it was so funny because it was years and years and years ago, really early in my career. And I was walking through alone with him in the property. And he was joking. He was turning around going, boo. And I was like, because I was disturbed, right? Because I'm thinking, ooh, someone committed suicide. But he wasn't bothered by it at all. He was hoping that he could get a good price on the property. So just because there's a stigma, it's not a bad thing. But we have to disclose it for the people that it may bother going forward, right? So the property was previously owned by someone notorious. Why would we care about that if it was owned by someone notorious? Like even if nothing happened, there was no criminal activity, has been no fire, but I'm a drug lord and I own this property. Why would that be a problem? Right? Mistaken identity. He decides to move. Somebody thinks he still lives there. Maybe he's not a drug lord. Maybe he's a political figure that is hated. Maybe it's something along those lines. You have to be aware of those things, right? Because then the next people going there, they might consider themselves in danger or be upset that they're owning that house. There are reports that the property is haunted. So I remember when I was in Oria, now it's Humber for real estate, but when I was in Oria, we were in the class and we were talking about stigmas and patent latent defects. And somebody says haunted, come on, that's not real. Like, I mean, crime is real, suicide is real, but haunted, how's that gonna bug someone? Right? It may, you know what I mean? Like, especially like I know where there's an area in East York. I don't know if you guys know Dentonia Park, right? Dentonia Park. So my family owned half that street. All my cousins were on that street. So you could go in and out of 11 houses on that street, right? And there was one house in the middle of that street that was abandoned forever. And all of us on the street said it was the haunted house, right? So when the people finally bought it, I think it was vacant for maybe 10 years, a long, long time. We all were telling them it was the haunted house. We're like, oh, you guys bought the haunted house, right? So if that's something that's going to bug your client, you have to be careful of it because it can be real and it can be something that bugs someone. A former grow up which has been remodeled according to the local health or building authority. So even if you buy a grow up and you bring it back to standard and you get it cleared by all the authorities saying, yep, there's no mold in the property, the air quality is good again, structurally it's fine again. The fact that it was a grow up is still a stigma on the property, right? Okay.
But
Yeah.
if you buy a property from our buyer and then we tell them that this is a grown up or whatever, right? And then they say, oh, we are okay with that. So do we have to do any sign or any documents?
So I
in that?
I would say
Yeah.
that, so normally there's a clause in there that says this property has never been used for the growth of marijuana or any illegal substance. It's something along the clause.
Oh,
That clause is normally in there, so I would either cross out that clause and have them initial it, or specifically put in a clause saying this property has been stigmatized because it was a former grow hop or something like that. Yeah, I definitely would have it in writing, 100%. Because no matter what, at the end of the day, even if your client loves you, a second something goes wrong or a second they don't like something, they're going to come to you and say, hey, you didn't tell me this. And you're going to go, yeah, remember I text you, I called you, I said that to you. So always put it in writing, 100%. Okay. So then we were talking about stigmas. Are they different for different people? So the relevance and impact of a potential stigma or any other such non-physical circumstance will be determined by a buyer's personal values and perceptions. So just because you think, it doesn't matter, you know what I mean? That happened 25 years ago. Who cares if, you know what I mean? There was a death in the house 25 years ago. Going forward, you can't make that decision for the buyer, right? So the following questions and responses may demonstrate a difficulty in practical terms of defining the stigma. Would it matter if the death was from natural causes, accidental versus being caused by a violent act or suicide? So just because you say, oh, he died naturally in his bed, that shouldn't bug anybody. Nobody came in and shot him, right? But some people that bothers, they don't want to be in that property again if a person passed away in the house, right? Some people don't care. They say, of course, lots of people die naturally in their sleep, doesn't bug me. Of course, I'll buy the home, right? Would it matter if it was a crib death or an infant? Would you be concerned by a death that occurred 20 years ago as you would if it was a recent one, right? These examples illustrate how difficult it is to clearly define what a stigma is. So disclosures by the seller. It's important for registrants to know that while sellers are required by law to disclose material, latent defects affecting the property that are known to them, an obligation which also exists for the seller's representative, if the material latent defect is also known by the representative. There is no legislation or case in Ontario to suggest that the seller or his representative is required to disclose the existence of a stigma to a buyer. Okay. So we are bound, while we do have laws in place saying that latent defects have to be disclosed, but we don't have anything written saying that we have to disclose a stigma. But the thing is that there's been cases where people come back and still win. Like I talk about that one in Brampton where they were concerned that there was a crime house across the street from them, right? So even though that agent can fight and say there's no written bylaw saying that I have to disclose that stigma on the property, it was still a case that the buyers won at the end of the day, right? So disclosure is always the best. Discovery by the buyer. If a registrant is representing a buyer who's concerned about a lot of specific types of stigma, it's highly recommended that the registrant and buyer conduct their own investigation, which it could include internet searches. We talked about using house creep. We talked about Googling the property. So to further protect the buyer, a registrant could include in any offer warranty regarding the status of the property. For example, the seller represents and warrants to the best of their knowledge and belief that this property has not been the site of a murder. So if your client is like, has there been a death in the house? You don't think there's been a suicide? You don't think, if you're getting asked these questions, like we were talking about, make sure you have that clause in your thing. Because even if you put it in your Schedule A and you say there hasn't been a death or suicide in the property, and then the seller goes ahead and signs off on that, maybe the next buyer is going to talk to the neighbor who's been in the neighborhood for 40 years, and she'll say, yeah, it was a real shame because 35 years ago there was a young couple here and she fell down the stairs and died. Right? But maybe the current seller didn't know that. Maybe they didn't have that conversation with the neighbor. But now you at least have it in writing. You at least have it in writing that you did your due diligence to inquire and the seller signed off on it, right? And then it's up to whoever, like the courts, if it goes that far to figure out who's at fault, who didn't do. The reason why we go through all of this is because no matter what, whether it's stigmas, defects, whether it's measurements for the room, whether it's legal description, whether it's title, whatever the case may be, you, at the end of the day, because I deal with a lot of complaints and I write a lot of the complaint responses and that, and Rico and Trevor are always looking for what you did to do your due diligence. Did you check Geo Warehouse, right? To make sure that lot size was okay. Did you Google it to see that there wasn't a stigma? Did you ask the right questions to make sure there wasn't a defect? Did you have a home inspection? Did you offer the opportunity to have a home inspection? So even though you think you didn't do anything wrong, and the listing agent, he gave the wrong information, it could still very easily come back on you because they always investigate both the listing agent and the co-op agent to see who they can put at fault for what. So stigma and multiple representation. If a registrant is representing a buyer who is concerned about specific types and the seller does not want to disclose the stigma. So now you're working on both parties and you're getting into that multiple representation. So it's sticky. What do? Your seller says, I don't want to say there was a death here 40 years ago. I didn't care when I bought it 20 years ago. Get it in writing. The seller has instructed not to disclose the stigma, right? The buyer approach you directly as the listing agent, and you have the option. You can say, now my seller has said I cannot disclose this. What is my option, right? We don't do the customer service anymore, obviously, right? But they do the self-represented parties, right? So we're gonna have to change the wording on that for the training, but self-represented parties, which means that you're not giving them your due diligence. You're just answering basic questions on behalf of the seller. Or client service representation. So full fiduciary obligation. If you take them on as a client, you have to notify the seller of this buyer and your obligation to them. So you have to say, now I've had a buyer come directly and I have to disclose to them because I'm now representing them as well, and multiple representation. And you know that we have to get our clients to sign off on multiple representation for our deals. So it has to be something that all parties agree on. Inform the buyer to seek alternate representation. I'd probably do it in that case, especially if I had a difficult seller and in writing they said, do not disclose this, right? It becomes a real problem. Am I doing my duty towards you as my buyer now when you come, knowing that I cannot disclose this, right? Or let them sign the self-represented, not the customer service, but the self-represented form. So it gets really tricky. Do you guys have any questions? How many clients have you guys had try to hide stuff from like potential buyers when they're fixing up the home? Lots, right? They're like, oh, no, I'll scrape that off the ceiling, or I'll paint that, or I'll just put some, what's it called, polyfill or putty in the wall crack. Don't worry about it. It'll look nice. It'll look nice, right? So everybody does. Every seller thinks it does because they're not thinking about the.
For me, the first year,
Yeah.
we bought a house in the Latent. Semi-detached house.
Yeah.
So it was a finance and home inspection condition, right? When we did the home inspection, the basement was unfinished. You can see the water particles on the insulation.
Yeah.
The insulation is covered with a sheet,
Yeah.
And then there is no crack. The inspector checked thoroughly, there is no crack, but there are water particles, right?
Yeah.
Then my buyer got panicked. Then when we asked the seller, he did the pressure wash.
Yeah.
With the pressure wash on the side to clean it, right? So we want to make it nice.
Okay.
So because of the pressure wash, the window is a little bit broken.
Okay.
Glass mirror, glass is broken, so the water came in inside. That's all, nothing else. But when I getting down to the staircase, I see the side wall, the concrete wall. They put the silicones wherever there is a gap, right?
Yeah.
So it's been already taken. When the settlement crack happens, they apply the silicone.
The epoxy that they put in, yeah.
They put it in. So they already happened. So then my buyer is okay. So the inspector came twice to check it out, and then we opened they tear off the insulation and keep it open. It's no leak. Yeah. The second one, I'm selling in Scarborough, close to Chandler Drive. It's a very old house. The heat vent. Heat vent always has the asbestos.
Asbestos, yeah.
So it came through my flyer. When they saw the flyer, they gave me the listing, right? So I go to sign the agreement, listing agreement. The house is in the father's name. but then there are two people, like the son and the daughter, right?
Yeah.
Daughter is the first one. The son signed the listing agreement. The daughter came in late after we discussed.
Mhm.
She told, you know what? There is asbestos in all the vents. Oh my God, why did you
Yeah.
tell me?
Yeah, exactly. It's
She
better
should have
though.
not told me.
So a lot of Scarborough homes have asbestos in it.
Yeah, asbestos
You got to know if you're, especially if you're selling a property and it's old grandma or grandpa's house and they haven't changed it, even if it's perfectly kept. A lot of times you go in the basement and they have those tiles. They're like the thick linoleum, then they stick, right? So telltale, I'll tell you a trick. If they're those little sizes, they're not 12 by 12 or any funky kind of thing in the basements when you go, they're asbestos.
So, no, what I did is like they already told me.
Mhm.
I did a home inspection, and then he said it may contain
Asbestos.
So then I put a whoever putting an offer, I told them there's a home inspection, take the copy, and then the guy who bought the property is neighbor.
Mhm. And
He then I put a statement in the offer itself saying that he reviewed the home inspection and he is aware what he was buying. I put a clause.
yeah.
So he signed it. So.
And again, asbestos isn't a scary thing unless you disturb it, right?
Yeah, it's not
So
wrong, you.
that's why people have lived in these homes for 40, 60 years and they don't have the third eye and, they haven't like whatever. But the next person coming in is the biggest danger because they're not going to want the decor that grandma and grandpa had in there the last 60 years in this Scarborough home. So they're going to start ripping it up. So they need to be aware that they need to hire a contractor with proper masks and everything to rip that asbestos out in order to put it back. Other than that, undisturbed, it's been fine, right? So that's why it's important to disclose that going ahead. I just want to talk a little bit about disclosure in a different way. So when we're buying and selling properties, so we talk a lot about these forms where we do a registrant's disclosure. So we have acquisition of property and disposition of property. What's the difference between the two? Acquisition is when we're buying a property, right? And disposition is when we're like selling the property. So if you are unsure if you need to do the disclosure, you guys can talk to me. But again, it's always best, right? If they figure somehow that you're related to or intertwined with or somehow in ownership of the property, the buyer can always come back and say that there is some kind of favoritism or some kind of fraud or some kind of coalition going on in the transaction. So to make them not feel this way, we do these disclosures. So you just fill them out and you say I, and then you put your name there. Declare that I am a registered real estate. Then you can put whether you're a salesperson, broker at Remax Ace. Excuse me. And then down here, you're going to put the property address and then you're going to put your explanations. So normally, pardon me, you would put I am a registered real estate representative or broker, and I am related to the buyer. I am a registered real estate broker, and I also own the property or own part of the property or am in part ownership of the corporation that owns the property. Or I am the landlord, also the landlord of the property, right? Whatever transaction you're doing, rental, purchase, sale, you're going to be filling out this form if you have any kind of interaction, whether it's your wife or your cousin involved in the transaction. Maybe I see a lot of agents, they don't sell their own house, right? But they still have to put the disclosure up that I'm an agent and I'm also the seller. Even if you're not selling your own house, you get another listing agent to do it, whatever the case may be. So important to put these disclosures up. They're there for a reason because there's been problems in the past with other agents selling and buying and not disclosing these things. So do it. I think most of the time if you come to me, I'm going to say, yeah, go ahead and do your disclosure because it's important too, right? So here's your seller disclosure of latent defects if they're aware of it. You can get them to sign off on the sheet. So if they tell you, oh yeah, you know what, every spring the basement leaks just a little in the back corner by the window. You get some sellers who are actually honest, and but it doesn't affect much. It's just a little drip down the wall, and I just haven't dug to get it fixed yet, right? So then you can come and you can get this disclosure here. It doesn't show up too clear on here. Hopefully in our new office, where's Vahisan, we get a nice fancy screen so my slides come up nice and clear. So the property structural defects, you could put it here, you check it off, you get your client to do their initial there, and then just put what you said, property cracked, southwest corner of the home near window, leaks in spring. Whatever they're telling you is the problem with the property. Okay. Property systems would be something like some pump doesn't keep up April to June, when the thaw is happening. Something along those lines. Have you guys used the seller disclosure ever before? Good thing to have for sure.
You for the leaves,
Mhm,
asking the agent own house or something,
mhm.
and then he said disclosure of $400. What is that mean? Disclosure $400 pay?
Disclosure for $100 pay?
400.
$400? What do you mean? Who was asking
Leasing the house.
for leasing the house?
For the disclosure, we have to submit that $400. Why like what?
No, you don't have to pay for disclosure. They have to disclose free. You don't have to pay for disclosure. Never.
Actually the form
Sure. Yeah.
I said 200, and then with something interest, maybe you had to pay and they will give back later. I don't know what.
So maybe are you reading the broker remarks? Because I've seen ones that say something like this. Please include Schedule A,
Gradually.
$200 key deposit,
Yeah, that's.
and attached disclosure. Maybe like it's all together and you're reading. Show it to me and I'll read it. Yeah. Because maybe there's a disclosure and a key deposit and something else. Yeah, show it to me. Let me see what else I have time to go over here. The seller property information statement, we went over it. So they have it for condos and for freeholds, right? They have the registrant's disclosure, and then they have the multiple representation. So whether they allow multiple representation or not, this is another disclosure that we have to do, and we have to get that form signed. This one's for landlord. Hi, how are you? But then they have the seller as well, the form for the sale. So everybody good with that? Any questions? Like I say, disclosure, always the best. Doesn't matter. Even if you don't think it's necessary, just disclose it. Because, like the example I was telling Yama, he was here earlier by himself. I was saying, like, if you buy the property, Baskaran, and then Yama buys it, or like, sorry, if you and Yama are looking to buy the property and I disclose it to you and him, and you say, I don't know, I'm not going to buy the property anymore, and he buys it, then there's no problem, right? But if both of you are fighting over the property and you bid higher than him, and you get the property, now we know it will bother you after the fact, and you find out you're gonna turn around and it's gonna be a problem anyways. And it's gonna be a problem for the listing agent, it's gonna be a problem from the buyer agent, it's gonna be a problem for everybody. So disclosure is always better before, right? I find a lot of agents go, no, I don't want to disclose that. That will slow down my showings, or that will, like, you don't always have to put the disclosure in the listing either. You guys know that, right? So what you just need to do is you have to make sure at the time of purchase before you reduce everything to writing. So if you think you don't have to put property had a fire 20 years ago in your description for your property. What you need to do though is you need to put call listing agent prior to preparing offer, or please attach disclosure and put your disclosure attached to your listing, right? So it won't necessarily kill the public from coming to see it, but it'll definitely weed out the people that think it's, I don't want that home that the suicide was in, after the fact. It'll save you from a lawsuit or save you from a complaint, so.
Earlier you mentioned like some of the agents say like they don't list their own house,
Yeah,
and then for any reason they don't list their house for.
I just find a lot of people just keep it an arm's length. I don't know why. They'll just say to their buddy or friend, hey, you list this for me, and then I'll see the disclosure attached saying seller is a real estate broker. And I'll be like, oh, that's funny. They're not selling their own house. Yeah.
But there's no issue, right?
No, there's no issue. There's no issue at all, as long as you make sure you're putting your disclosure in. Yeah, I'm the listing agent and I own the property. There's no problem. Yeah. I have some of my own property up right now under mine. There's no problem doing it. As long as you have your disclosure. So my disclosure is attached to the listing. Yeah.
I put a same thing for the menu.
Yeah.
Agent is a.
Owner and a salesperson.
You had to write to put it the listing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just know the area you're working in. You know what I mean? Like if you're working in Old Scarborough, we're talking, you're looking out for asbestos in a lot of the places. When you're walking through, you can tell what asbestos, like, what kind of products look like asbestos or where it might be. If you're working a lot in East York, the problem a lot is termites there, right? A lot of the old wooden kind of frames, for the foundations and that, lots of termite problems, right? You have to contact some of the popular companies out there like Aetna or something to come and do an inspection on top of your home inspection, right? You just have to do a little research. You're working on Port Hope. You have to get the environmental report, right? If you're buying and selling in Port Hope. So if you're unsure, you know what I mean? Do a little research. What do I need to look out for in East York? Or come and ask me or Beeson or somebody who might know, and do a little digging to figure out. Because sometimes, like I say, if you go into East York and you only offer a home inspection to your client, right? Home inspection, I did their financing condition, I gave them everything in the world, and then they close and they realize the back kitchen addition is being eaten by termites and about to fall apart. They can sue you because they say that you as an agent should know that I should have had a termite inspection in East York, right? Don't sell anything in East York without a termite inspection, right? Okay. Everybody good? So everybody take care this week. We flipped to Wednesday this week because I had a little emergency yesterday morning, but Tuesday again next week going forward. Um, it's the long weekend. It's Thanksgiving. You guys got plans? Gonna eat some turkey? A lot of eating, a lot of eating, a lot of cooking, a lot of baking. Yeah, yeah. There'll be a little bit of wine, I'm sure, this weekend. Everybody have a good Thanksgiving weekend and take care. We'll be doing our grand opening soon, which is fun, right? We have to cancel our potluck, but our grand opening will be coming up soon. So that'll be exciting. Hopefully maybe not the next training session, but the next one after that might be in the nice new big room. We'll have to see how fast things get set up. And that'll be good. We'll have to do some exciting topic, get a lot of people there. Awesome. Everybody have a lovely morning. Take care online there.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.